Hey everyone, welcome back to Odyssey 40k. I'm Chris, and in this video we're going to be talking about the main reasons why you're losing games in Warhammer and not progressing as fast as you want to be. I hope you enjoy. So the first thing we're going to be talking about in this video is watching streams. Like, the issue I have with this, right, is watching streams can be really beneficial. It's really good to use it to understand new factions, to do all sorts of different things, to understand how a play might work. There's some great content creators out there that do great live streamed and great recorded battle reports that you can go and watch. But if you're trying to get better, playing a game is always better than watching a stream. So if you're going to sit down and just watch a battle report for 3 hours, if you have access to TTS or a local play group that you can just go and play, or you have a table at your place so you can get someone over to play an actual game, that is going to be so much more beneficial than watching a battle report at some point or a live stream. So like, if you have 3 hours, play TTS. That's the first thing I want to get into in this. The main thing you want to use streams for is to gain knowledge. So whether it's deployment, whether it's the movement phase, how the army kind of functions, the kind of overall plan of the army, how the damage kind of works in armies. There are really good things you can get from these live streams, but don't take them as all your practice. You cannot just watch battle reports and assume that is all the practice you need. You just write your list, build your army, paint it, and then go to a tournament without any practice games just from watching battle reports. You can't do that. You have to actually get that practice. You have to get physical touch with the models and play your games. You can't just assume that you're going to be good from watching that kind of stuff. So that's one big way that is holding you back from progressing, is just being like, oh, well, I'll just spend a couple of hours, I'll watch a battle report. Even if you only have an hour, you're like, well, there's not enough time to play a game. You can jump on TTS with a friend, be like, hey, can we just practice the first round or the first 2 rounds, or practice deployment in round 1, and just do that a couple of times, because often that doesn't actually take too long, and you can kind of talk with your opponent, with your friend that you're playing with, but like, okay, well, if I do this, what would you kind of do? And it kind of start to understand the matchup a lot more. It's still more beneficial than sitting down and half watching a battle report. Obviously, there is times where watching battle reports is really good, which is like if you're painting, if you need to get that stuff painted for the next tournament, watching a battle report to gain some extra value while you're painting, while you're doing the thing that you can't physically play, absolutely awesome. Like, do that, yes, 100%. I often like watching my friends play on Tabletop Simulator while I'm painting as well. Like, if they're live streaming their games on Discord, I'll jump in, have a chat with them while I'm painting and watching their game, so I can also ask a couple of questions. It's a bit more interactive that way. So try and think of those kind of options. Now, one tip for when I'm watching battle reports is what I often like to do is watch the beginning. So they talk about their army lists, then talk about their deployment. So I watch all of that, and then I skip ahead to about turn 2 or 3, kind of see where the battle's going, what's happening, what kind of units have died, what kind of units are still alive, what's holding what resources, what the scoreboard is. Listen to that for another 5 to 10 minutes, kind of gauge where the game's at, and then go to the end, watch the last turn of the game, and then listen to the recap. This usually takes about half an hour. It's a lot more effective at gaining knowledge about both armies being played. So if you don't play an army specifically, this is a really good way of being like, okay, this is how they kind of deploy, this is kind of what the battlefield will look like halfway through a game, this is the kind of thoughts, this is how the end game plays, and this is how the thoughts of the players ended up. It's a really good way of kind of condensing it down to gaining as much knowledge out of it. But you do miss some parts. You miss the tricksy plays that they might do. So you don't gain knowledge of you gain knowledge of the army as a whole, not on specific units in the army. So there's kind of there's a bit of a trick there that I sometimes use when I'm watching battle reports. Like, oh, I'll watch the first. Okay, those are some interesting remarks. Okay, let's bounce ahead a little bit. Okay, yep, that's kind of where I kind of thought that was going to happen. Okay, now move ahead again, and just kind of keep doing that. Find your own rhythm. There'll be different people who have different places that they want to stop and be interested in. One thing I would say though is watch time is really important for these creators. So one thing I do always do is once I've done that, I go back and I usually just have the video playing on mute in the background just to watch the whole thing through, just so the creators do get that full watch time of the video, just as a nice little trick. And yeah, that's why you can utilize live streams and battle reports really well, but don't use them as your actual practice. Next we have, don't try and win at all costs. Win with the idea that you should be growing as a player. You should be gaining something out of every win and every loss. So the first part here is, don't try to beat Kevin. What I mean by this, Kevin is a fictitious person. If Kevin is always beating you, don't build your list specifically to beat this person. If you try and build a list to specifically beat one person, you're probably just making a worse list overall and not really gaining any advantage after the game. Like, yes, you might beat this person, but well, if you bought and painted and wrote in a list every unit that will help beat that faction or beat this person's army, well, of course, like you're putting all the cards, you're stacking the hand in your favor, right? Like, you're not gaining anything from that. Whereas if you keep bringing a good rounded list that you think is good into a wide variety of armies, then you'll eventually understand how this person's army works and ways of beating it. And like, that's why Discord communities and all this kind of place can be really good. And if, like, say you're playing Imperial Knights and you're playing against Necrons, you could go into the Imperial Knights or the Necrons chats and be like, hey, like, I'm playing X faction. How, like, I'm really struggling with this unit. What are ways you can like deal with this unit, or what are some of the struggles that this unit might have if you're going into your opponent's factions chat. That's a really good way of kind of just like gaining a bit of advantage, but not with just strictly building your list, making your list worse to beat a certain player. You don't gain anything from that. You just feel a little better inside, but really it's not helping you progress as a player. This one's quite good. Trying to win is good. Trying not to lose is better. Often when we're trying to win a game, you might try and do some more riskier plays. So if you're trying not to lose a game, you're actually going to be playing a lot more conservative. Okay, what is the minimum I need to do to win this game? This is definitely a more singles orientated slide than a teams orientated slide for 40k. But you really want to just see what is the minimum I do to keep the status quo even. If I start to go lower, I obviously need to try and win a bit more, or try not to lose a little harder, right? So like, it's always going to be a bit of a balancing act there. But the main thing is, don't just try and risk it all to win early. You want to be trying to not lose a game. So how do you do that? Well, you don't send everything forward right off the bat, right? You know, like, well, I'm just going to rush my opponent down. Some armies do play that way though, so you have to understand the army that you're playing. But for the most part, even like World Eaters don't just run at your opponent turn one and hope for the best. They probably stage up, and then while my opponent's staying back, I'm just going to sit here scoring points. I'm winning this game from doing nothing. So now my opponent has to act first. Cool, awesome. So you can kind of play this kind of control style game instead of this kind of, well, I need to win this game, so I'm just going to go kill my opponent, because if I kill my opponent, I win. It's not how games of 40k often play out. So trying not to lose is so much better than trying to win a game. And the last bit of tip I'll give here is track all your games, guys. Like, even if you're playing on Tabletop Simulator, playing in person, use the Battles app, put all your games into it. Even if you're playing on TTS, load it up on your phone. Your phone's going to be with you when you're on your computer anyway, and track all those games. It'll just give you such an idea of all the data that you want to keep track of, your wins, your losses, how tight games were, what games you're struggling with, what factions you're struggling with, what players you might be struggling with if you're playing in the similar friend group constantly, and similar play group. So all these kind of things are things that you want to have this data on. Why not have it? It's so easy to keep a hold of. Use it. This is one that I think could be slightly contentious. Is dice don't lose games, you lose games. Don't blame the dice, guys. The dice are inanimate objects that you're rolling. If anything, it's your fault that the dice are rolling bad. No one else's, right? Like, there's always going to be a little bit like, oh, well, I just need to roll one additional 4-up. On average, I should roll it. But you're still rolling 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 dice. Every single dice has a 1 in 6 chance to roll each of those numbers. There is no rule that it says half of them have to be above this number or half of them have to be below this number. None of that ever applies. You could roll 20 dice and roll all 4 or more. Is it likely? No, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. You roll so many dice throughout your career as a 40k player that it's going to happen. There's going to be absolutely crazy dice fluctuations. The dice are never going to do what you want them to do. So instead, what we can do is be critical after a game on where we positioned our models. Be critical on your play. Do what, after a game, be like, well, this unit didn't really need to go out there. I didn't send enough resources to go and kill this thing. Like, oh yeah, the dice did roll a little low, but then once you actually check online, a great tool to check for the average dice and then kind of figuring out how unlikely it is for your dice to roll is a web browser called Unit Crunch. You can go on there, you can type in your unit's abilities and damage profiles, and then put in your enemy's toughness and save and stuff like that. And then it will spit out, after generating 2,000 rolls or whatever, what the average likelihood of that is to happen. So a really good tool to kind of understand where the variance can occur, but don't take it as gospel. Don't be like, well, on average I should always get, or there's an 80% chance that I should kill a monolith every single time with this activation. It's like, well, there's still 20% chance that it won't happen. So over 5 games of 40k, one of them is not going to happen. Well, that's actually pretty substantial, right? So, and like, how often is it that you rolled a 1 into a 1, right? It's actually quite unlikely to happen. So if that can happen in one game, that could happen in multiple games. Don't. The main thing I'm trying to put out here is be critical of your play. Don't put too much weight on the dice, because it's, in the end of the day, it is your responsibility to control your models. You can't control the dice. You can give rerolls. You can give yourself as many benefits as possible. But in the end of the day, it's where you move your models, where you position stuff. That's why you're winning or losing a game, not because of what the dice are rolling. So yeah, this one's about making excuses. So this is very much tails on from the last one. I hear so often, is like when I go up to a table and I'm playing, say, Tau, and I'm like, oh, my faction just, this faction just always ruins me. It's like, well, yeah, but at the same time, like, does it really matter? Like, there's still a game to play every single time. A lot of people have this defeatist mentality when it comes to certain factions, especially when something is really strong in the meta at the moment. So, like, say, Eldar and Imperial Guard are going to be really strong at the moment, right? Well, if you're playing playing against those factions, you don't want to just be thinking, well, I'm just going to lose this game, because then you're going to play to lose that game. So you want to play in a way that makes it like you think positively about it. It's like, oh, well, okay, I know I need to deal with this unit, and this unit really early on. Otherwise, I'm going to be in some trouble. So make your game plan around doing these things. Understand the matchup, and like, don't be like, oh, every time I play Imperial Guard, I just lose every single time. It's just horrible. It's like, well, that's just not a great way to approach any game. And if you do lose, then you have this easy out, like, oh well, I always lose to it, so do it. Whereas you want to go and be like, oh, I have a game here to play, and at the end, like, well, that was a tough matchup, but again, it was my fault for losing, not because of the faction I was playing. Obviously, this tweaks a little bit in teams because you play lists that are designed to really heavily beat certain armies, but we won't get into that for this. Another thing that I constantly hear is like, oh, I'm always unlucky. I can never roll better than an X. I can never roll a 4-up. I can never roll a 5 or more when I need to. It's like, well, everyone's dice are the same. Like, the best players in the world have had great dice and they've had terrible dice. Dice are pretty average. Again, it comes back down to that positional stuff. Don't use these easy excuses to be like, well, I'm just unlucky. It's like, no, you're not unlucky. There might be times where you're unlucky, and you might be weighing on those more than the times that you are lucky. But more often than not, it's because you're just not playing the game right. You're not playing the game better than your opponent. If your opponent is playing better, they're going to win that game. So just kind of understand that you can improve, but don't be just flagging everything off that, oh, I'm just unlucky, because then you don't want to improve. You want to get luckier, which is not something that you can ever achieve naturally, right? And this, just as a little side thing, please don't ever complain to your opponent about either your rolls or how much stronger their faction is than yours. You no one can control your rolls, you or your opponent. It can be very awkward when one of you is rolling really well and the other is rolling really bad, but neither of you have the option of changing that, right? So there's no point complaining about it. But also don't rub it in your face when you're rolling so much better than your opponent, right? Like there's a give and take there. But yeah, next is, this is just a really good rule to when you're growing as a player, is focus on one army. You don't want to be playing 7 different factions every single time you play. You play in a different faction, picking up different detachments. You focus on one thing, so then you can understand and know your rules really, really well. Because knowing your rules really well means you can think about other things while you're playing the game. You can think about your positioning better. You can think about, okay, how do I achieve these secondary cards, because you know all the rules in your army. Whereas if you keep flipping between faction to faction, you're like, oh, okay, what's this guy's move? Can I actually get and do this? Or can I advance and shoot with this unit? Let me just wait and check. So you're taking one more time, which is a resource in 40k, and you're also giving yourself so many more decisions you have to make in every game. Whereas if you just know your rules really well, you don't have to worry about that. Understanding damage also really piles off of this as well. Knowing that, okay, I need to put 2 units into this because I know one doesn't really kill it, because you've played that game 3 or 4 times, and you know, like, well, one of them like can kill it, but it's a bit iffy. If I send 2 in, I know it dies. Cool. Then you just know, again, just that muscle memory. Well, so I know I need to do this, or I need to gamble and I need to just send one in. But you can make that choice a lot quicker because you've played the same faction so often, and you kind of have those repetitions to understand what you need to do. And also, it's just really good to feel comfortable while you're playing. If you're playing with models that you've painted yourself, you're not playing WARHAMMER, you know all your rules, you understand what you need to do every game, you just feel so much more comfortable, so much more easy to play that game. When I was playing Tau, I played Tau for almost 2 years straight without playing a single different faction. By the end of it, every game was really easy. There was still a lot of decisions to make, don't get me wrong. But I would deploy because I knew exactly how I wanted to deploy my army, so everything was just deployed. My opponent was usually halfway through deployment, and I'm like, I'm done, dude. Finish, just wait until you finish your deployment. Because I knew where everything wanted to go. There was no stress involved there. It was really nice, just a really comfortable way, knowing where everything was going, knowing how your turn 1s always go, because you've played it so many times. So definitely, this is a huge tip. Really, focus on one, maybe 2 armies. If they play really similarly, you can branch out a little bit, and once you get better and understand that army, branch out to that second army. Once you get really good with both of those armies, then you can branch out to another, depending on how many you want to play. But really, really just focus on the things, understand your rules, understand your damage, and feel comfortable while you're playing. If you're feeling really stressed about oh, I don't know what this can do, you're just not going to have as good of a time, and it's not going to be as easy for you. And then finally, some tips for playing. Enter a community. So I have a Discord, but there's also so many other really, really great Discords. Mine's a fledgling one. There's basically no one in it at the moment. So if you want to, there will be a link in the description below to my Discord. But there's also great ones. You can jump on the Patreon for StatCheck. They have a great Discord. Art of War has a great Discord. There's a one for just New Zealand as a whole that you can jump on. All these places that you can just go in, ask for advice from other people that are wanting to help you. So as I said earlier, if you have an issue about Imperial Knights, you can go into the Imperial Knights channel and be like, hey guys, I'm having a real struggle playing with Canis Rex. How do you guys use them? And then people will probably go on a phone call with you and be like, hey, this is what I do, or let's jump into TTS and see how you're deploying them so we can try and help you out. People want to help other people. So jumping into one of these communities, getting advice from your friends, from your peers, from other players, it will help you grow so much more. And just go in with a sense of, I want to learn. Don't be like, well, I'm the best player, I don't want to listen to anyone else. Go in being like, well, I'm here to become the best player that I can be. So ask those questions. Ask, hey, how do I beat X faction with this faction? All that kind of stuff. And the last thing is, don't give up, guys. 40k is so much fun and so diverse with so many different people that play it. Just don't give up, keep at it, and you'll have so much fun playing. So let me know in the comment section down below any other tips and other reasons why you think you might not be growing, or great reasons why you have grown. What are some of the things that have propelled you into great areas? I know one for me is once I started making a really good friend group in competitive 40k, my success skyrocketed because I had more people to talk about, more people to play against. All this kind of stuff really helps with that. So let me know in the comments below what kind of things you want to see, and what kind of things helped you in your journey in 40k. If you like this video, there will be another video probably here-ish, talking about how to set goals and what goals you should have in Warhammer 40k. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Anyway, catch you next time. Bye-bye.